the Lord has done. President Trump is considering cutting back on Chinese tariffs ahead of trade talks this weekend. U.S. and Chinese officials are set to meet in Switzerland for the first meetings since the trade war between the two nations began. Chinese President Xi is present for Victory Day celebrations in Russia. The day celebrates the surrender of Nazi Germany, ending World War II. Xi and Russian President Putin have been meeting to strengthen ties between their nations. I'm Catherine Hadro with EWTN News Nightly. Follow us on Facebook and X, and be sure to join us this evening at 9 p.m. Eastern.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line with today's host, Colin Donovan. In North America, call toll-free 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Hey, tremendous Friday to each and every one of you. Thanks so much for tuning in to EWTN's Open Line. It's not just any ordinary Friday. It's the Friday after the election of a new Supreme Pontiff for the Holy Roman Church. And we're here to talk about that here a little bit at the beginning of the program, and any questions that you may have about the new Holy Father or the interregnum or anything having to do with the Catholic faith at all. We would love to entertain those questions. Just pick up the phone and give us a call. The number is 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're outside the United States and Canada, your number is 1-205-271-2985. And we'll even put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. You can always send us an email. That email address is openline@EWTN.com. I'm Jack Williams. Pedro Quiles producing the program. Your call screener is Matt Gubensky and Ace McKay handling our social media efforts. So if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook Live, you can type a question into the chat window, and it may find its way to us by the end of the program. And our host, as he is every Friday, our very own Vice President of Theology, Mr. Colin Donovan. How are you?
Doing pretty good and very excited, like I know everybody is.
So, you know, I received a text from our good friend Adam Wright, who works for Covenant Radio there in St. Louis, our great affiliate in St. Louis with over 40 stations strong. And as soon as the white smoke came out of the chimney yesterday, he texted me and he said, "It isn't me, is it you?" And I told him I wasn't allowed to say. So.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
They'd be going pretty deep to get to any of us Joes over here in North America. But one Joe apparently was closer to the surface.
Keeping in mind, of course, that Joe has spent more time out of the U.S. than he has in the U.S. But
it doesn't matter.
A citizen nonetheless.
Exactly.
So for those of us who may have been, studying for finals or sleep under, sedimentary rock or something like that, who may not have heard that we do have the first American Pope in the history of the Catholic Church, and tell us a little bit about him. And I really think that the process itself proved to be pretty effective, as it always does.
It really does. The system works. I guess after this particular method, 1,000 years and about 1700 on the general premise of electors of the Roman Church and its surrounds in some fashion, electing the Pope. So it's a tried and true system, and it does seem to put out a product at the end, and for that, thanks be to God. But I think he's a Chicago boy, like our own Father Mitch, and to my extent, an adopted one from having grown up grade school, high school, and college there. So that's quite interesting. I'm sure there seems to be quite a bit of speculation. For example, I know yesterday his brother had to smash down a rumor that he was a Cubs fan of all things, but a White Sox fan. No, he's a White Sox fan. So
as a native St. Louisan, I feel the need to point out to you that He will never be a Cub. He will never be a White Sox, but he was indeed a Cardinal.
That's a good point. So, you know, he has as thorough a resume as, frankly, I've seen on any, member of the clergy. I'm sure there are others equally or so. But, he joined religious life right after getting a degree in mathematics at Villanova University in Pennsylvania. He finished up, he did some theology in Chicago and then got the licentiate and doctorate in Rome at the Angelicum, my alma mater. He's been a religious superior of his Augustinian order, both in local monasteries, but also the prior general of the whole order of St. Augustine. So he has that. He's been served as in curial staff in dioceses as well as bishop. And he's been in the Roman Curia the last several years in various capacities, most recently as prefect for the dicastery for bishops. And also, and this seldom gets mentioned, he is simultaneously the president of the Commission for Latin America, which is a very important, office, because this is how the Rome cooperates with the CELAM, the South American Bishops' Conference. And so this is an important office. It certainly gave him a lot of visibility among Latin American bishops. His curial posts and his, headship of the Augustinians certainly gave him a lot of Roman attention as well. And so I think his wide experience, and as you said, he's really multinational, and he even has Peruvian citizenship from his time as a bishop in Peru as well. So he had a lot of things going for them. He was on the bottom of many lists of, where will they go if one of the so-called favorites doesn't? He was on most of those lists. So it wasn't a total and complete shock, but it was very much a surprise because his nationality is, in addition to being Peruvian, American by birth. And it's sort of been taken for granted for the last, 75 years, at least since the Cold War, that an American would never be elected Pope. And now that barrier has been crossed, so I don't know what other barriers are still. Maybe plucking a layman out of some place is a barrier that will be crossed, but I sort of doubt it.
Africa maybe would be the next frontier.
Well, in terms of continents, certainly I think that would be, and someday Asia. We'll see what happens in the Lord's plan.
It was interesting because as you look deeper into his resume, I remember when my late wife Susie and I spent a year in Springfield, Illinois. And while we were there, I worked for a big box retailer that everybody would know the name if I said it. And they were opening a new store in Springfield, coming into that market. Mm-hmm. And so I worked on the team that helped build that store interiorly and get it up and ready to go. And I remember the gentleman who had been sent there to open that store and to be the, in charge of that facility. He pulled everybody together at the beginning and he said, if there's a job to do in this store, I've done it. And I think that's kind of what we're getting with this Holy Father.
I think that describes it very accurately. He's familiar with everybody, rich and poor. He's familiar with the turmoil in the world. Hey, simply growing up in Chicago in the 60s, man, you saw everything. The Democratic National Convention, the race riots, and all of the other things that went. You sort of saw the microcosm of the state of civil society. He's been in Latin America with its many problems, dealing in a very poor country, Peru. So he's had a lot of experiences, which is important to draw on. Experience is a great leveler of helper to decision making, and so I think he can, as Pope, he will be able to discuss things with bishops from around the world and at least understand from his own experience some of the context, which may be Asian or somewhere else, but I think that whether it's the context of conflicts, national conflicts, or internal conflicts, civil conflicts, or whether it's moral or or whatever they are, he will have some knowledge of that from his very wide experience.
And I don't think we can ignore the fact that when he appeared on the loggia, the emotions of the moment were clearly not lost on him. And, there was some genuine emotion there, which I think speaks to very good things. And also he was able to compose himself, and maybe this is silliness, but he just has a regal air about him.
Yeah, he does. Apparently, he didn't get it all out of him, his tears in the Chapel of the Tears. He saved a little bit for the world to see, but I don't think that's a bad thing, like you said. I think it's, it really points to his humanity and his understanding of the weight, in a way, of the cross. The successor of Peter didn't help the Lord carry his cross at all, but Peter and his successors have certainly suffered the cross and carry the cross, sometimes as martyrs, but also in their daily duties with the weight of the care of souls of all Christians, all Catholics certainly, but even in a certain way of all Christians. So I think there is a good reason for the Chapel of Tears, and it's to know the man understands that is very comforting.
Straight ahead, we'll talk to Michael in Spokane, Washington, and we've got plenty of time for your phone calls and a couple of open lines at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. It's Open Line Monday with Colin Donovan.
Don't miss the latest Catholic news and Catholic newsmakers on Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo every weekday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio Extra.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
As always, my role isn't to support or oppose any political party, but simply report on events. Pollsters say there's a seismic shift in the way Catholics are voting. Normally Democrat voters, but that appears to be changing in large part due to abortion. The Democrat Party is now viewed as the pro-abortion party, with the Republican Party largely opposing it. Catholic voters have taken notice and are voting accordingly. Political analyst Steve Cortes points to the recent election. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania have huge Catholic populations, and all three battleground states supported Donald Trump. Consistent polling shows this trend is nationwide. The pro-life movement has long advocated single-issue voting regardless of party. It appears American voters are listening.
Follow us on social media at Life Issues Institute.
This is Dr. Greg Popchak from More to Life.
This is Father Joseph Mary.
Aloha, this is Bear Wozniak.
This is Ryan Petty.
The most trusted Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question, call 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. Or send us an email to openline@EWTN.com.
I know some of you are aware, but some of you may not be aware that EWTN has its own official YouTube channel with tens of thousands of videos covering just about every conceivable topic of interest to Catholics, and best of all, it is free. Every day, EWTN adds new radio and TV shows, live events, devotionals, homilies, specials. All these things are added to the YouTube channel. When you go to YouTube, simply search EWTN. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. Grab one of these open phone lines. First up today is Michael in Spokane, Washington, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Michael, thanks for holding. You're on with Colin Donovan.
Oh, thank you both. Hi, Colin. Beautiful day in Spokane. We're going to be around 80 degrees here. Well, my first reaction on learning the new Pope was an American was one of great surprise and joy. Then I learned he was from Chicago, Illinois, the Windy City, where he grew up. And so then I had to ask, was he a Chicago Cubs baseball or Chicago Whites baseball fan? And Matt gave me the answer. I think he's Chicago White Sox, but God bless them both. He's probably cheering for both. As you know, he was from Villanova University, graduated from University of Villanova in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. He has a degree in canon degree in law, and he worked with the Peru for over 20 years in Peru, working with the poor and the forgotten and protecting the unborn. And also during this month of May, the month of Mary, I just believe that the Mother of God is helping and with him and be with Pope Leo the 14th.
Yeah, I think she is. He mentioned Our Lady of Pompeii, which is very dear to the Italians. And there was a feast day of the apparition of St. Michael at Mount Gargano, which is in the southeastern part of Italy, near where Padre Pio lived, St. Padre Pio. But you're right about his experience with the poor. Latin America has generally been a poor country, and sometimes with great contrast between very well off and very poor people. And so that's something that, the Church always has something to say to that. There's a wonderful statement in an encyclical of Pope John Paul II on the Divine Mercy, writing about the Father. And, of course, the Pope is our new spiritual father, so this certainly applies to his office as well. But the Pope gives as a definition of mercy the love of God reaching down to deliver somebody from misery, lifting them out of misery. And it's interesting that in Latin, mercy and the word misery have the same root. Misericordia is mercy. And so God lifting somebody out of their misery. Now, the greatest misery, as the Pope goes on to explain, is the misery of sin. But there's also the worldly misery. There's the poor, there's sickness, there's other kinds of distress and the problems we see around us all the time. And so Jesus could go around healing and doing miracles of mercy, if you will, but we're left to more mundane means generally. And I think having a pope who knows about the poor, as also did Pope Francis, and had a very long history of trying to help the poor in Argentina and even in the city of Rome whenever he could, it keeps it front and center, and I think it will keep us all conscious of this, that there are those in the world who are less well off than we are. And that's, again, both materially and spiritually. Spiritually, as our Holy Father in the spiritual domains, the primary mission, of course, is to evangelize and to bring the gospel, to bring Jesus Christ to the whole world. But that other mission of mercy in the material order is also present there, and the Church has done that abundantly over the years with hospitals and leper colonies and other acts of charity. The greatest charitable institution that has ever been on the face of the earth is the Catholic Church. And so he's the head of that now. And so the Pope is in a position both to help materially, but especially spiritually, which his office is uniquely situated to do. So I think he's a man who knows both of these realities, the spiritual and the material. He's seen where the help is most needed in both of those domains, both being a confessor and a priest, a bishop, and now Pope. So I think we have every reason to expect good things from him, even greatness, and we'll see what time provides in that respect.
God bless you, Michael. We appreciate the phone call today. That opens up a line for you at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Father Larry Richards, who used to be the host of Open Line Thursday, when people would call in and ask him what to look for in a spiritual director, he would always tell them that the first thing you have to look for is watch this person say Mass and see if you can tell that they know who's in their hands when they're saying Mass. And the first Mass is Holy Father this morning by Leo the 14th. I think anyone had to have been pleased with not only his remarks and his homily, but just the entire way in which he handled himself during that liturgy.
Yeah, reverence is a virtue of justice. It's what is owed to the person who is revered, and that can be, somebody who has responsibility for you, like your parents or you're in a civil society. But we associate it primarily with God and the things of God. But it's nonetheless, it's the reverence due in justice, the honor due in justice to the person according to their dignity. And so there is no greater venue, if you will, for reverencing than in the Holy Eucharist, whether you're the priest celebrating the Mass or whether you're the person sitting in the pew coming up to receive the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord in Holy Communion. So that he is conscious of this reality, the reality that he has made God present through his priesthood, and then the reality of who was made present. This says volumes about him. And the contrary wise, there's an old thing that Fulton Sheen used to say. He gave a lot of conferences to priests, some of them which were on tape, and I've listened to those over the years. He said that the more the priest puts his own personality forward, the less people see Christ. So when you see somebody, they follow the rubrics, they're reverent, they manifest that they believe the reality of what they're doing and who they're receiving, that's the greatest witness that any of us can give, but especially a priest.
833-288-EWTN. That's our toll-free number. Wide open phone lines for you on this Open Line Friday. 833-288-3986. Colin, the next Holy Father who takes a name arbitrarily for no reason at all will be the first. And so there's clearly some significance behind choosing the name Leo, being the 14th Holy Roman Pontiff to do so. It immediately harkens us back to Leo the Great, the original Leo, but most recently Leo the 13th. And so I think that this is really going to give us an opportunity to really teach the world anew the true meaning of Rerum Novarum, and, the fact that this is not the incarnation of Karl Marx.
Yeah, the Church's social teaching, which is what Rerum Novarum is, that was generally considered to be the first social encyclical. Not this first social teaching. The gospel is filled with social teaching, the things the popes have said. But something written, an encyclical, which means a circular letter, it's usually addressed to the bishop, sometimes to a wider audience as well. In such a circular letter of the Pope, fully dedicated to the subject of the moral teaching of the Church as applies to the social sphere. That can be economic, political, anything where, two human beings interact together and there's a social relationship can be covered by the social teaching. And so, particularly on the larger scale of societies, this is where we see most of our problems. This is where, obviously, we saw capitalism develop out of the mercantile system and the economics in the 18th century. In the 19th century, we saw Marxism developed as sort of in parallel, but not exactly so, as a response to that. So social teaching is talking about those kinds of relationships that go on in the economic and political sphere. But it's really just the moral law applied to sort of a larger scale. What can we do? What do we have to say? Can the government, for example, take all of your property, confiscate it just on the basis of, well, we're the government, we have the authority, we're going to take everything? Now, we know that constitutionally in the U.S., these kinds of things are addressed from a civil law point of view. But also from the moral law point of view, you have to say that although all goods are destined for everybody, God created the world. He put the gifts that he gave to the world in it. We are called to be its stewards. And so as stewards, we have some responsibility for it. What is, in some sense, in quotes, almost ours, because we have to feed our families, take care of ourselves. So the notion of private property was applied to that in the social teaching. And the church defended, for example, in Rerum Novarum, the Pope did, private property. But on the other hand, we also know this other principles, and that is the universal destination of goods, that there is a limit to private property. And we see that take place even in civil law when the government decides, well, we have to build a freeway and, we need a strip of land to do it, and so public domain is declared and land is taken. That's where private property is taken by reasonable use of authority to serve a larger, more public purpose. So all of these things require a balance of morality and of justice, of what the society needs and what is a just treatment of the individual, compensated treatment, for example. So really, Leo XIII kicked off those social encyclicals dealing with this issue as came up at the end of the 1800s, and the other popes of the 20th century have continued it.
It's EWTN's Open Line Friday with Colin Donovan.
EWTN is looking for qualified people to fill a number of exciting positions. Make a difference using your God-given talent. Visit EWTN.com/employment today.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. Please join me for Ascension's Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. We're going through the entire Bible and the Catechism in 365 days. If you've ever wanted to understand what it means to be Catholic and allow those truths to shape your life, this is for you.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
This is a Pro-Life Minute with doctors Stephen and Gracie Christie.
Gracie, here's an argument we're hearing all the time since the Dobbs case, and it goes like this. If you oppose abortion, you're inevitably putting mothers at risk when they face life-threatening medical emergencies. How do we handle this?
Well, that's pure nonsense. There is no major voice in the pro-life movement that argues that a mother has to risk her life to carry her baby to term. The life of the mother is always prioritized in the case of true maternal danger, as in ectopic pregnancy, preterm rupture of membranes, maternal infection, or even maternal cancer.
You're 100% correct. And to make sure we're all perfectly clear, in a pro-life state, in a pro-life hospital, and with a pro-life doctor, a pregnant mother's life is always the top priority.
For more on the culture of life, go to EWTN.com/prolife.
On Monday's Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, our topic will be helping those with addiction. And now back to Beacon of Truth with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
You know, I want to invite you to keep it right here on many of these EWTN stations. Beacon of Truth with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers coming up next. Great guest today, Jessica Cox, who is an armless person without arms, who has not only been successful in life, but she's a pilot of all things. So hear her incredible story today, as well as breaking open Psalm 90. That's on Beacon of Truth with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers coming up next on many of these EWTN radio stations. Back to the phones we go. Liz is up next, a first-time caller in Spokane, Washington. You're number one in Spokane today, Colin. She's also listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Liz, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'd like to give you a little background, and then I have some questions. Is that all right?
Sure.
In 2012, my daughter had a baby, and within a few weeks, she was diagnosed with cancer. And since then, she has been cured, and she's all right. But during that time, and we did not know that she was going to live, I had the baby in the lobby of the hospital, and while she was being treated, I baptized the baby myself. I used the proper Catholic formula, and it was my intention that the baby be baptized Catholic. At the time, I didn't know I was not supposed to do that. So I have some questions. My first question is the baby a baptized Catholic? And did the baby receive the baptismal graces of Catholic baptism?
Sure. Well, there only is Catholic baptism, even if it's performed by a Jewish nurse at the request of the parents, or by Protestants in their church according to their practice, providing that it's water in the Trinitarian formula. So, yes, she would be baptized. You certainly did it in good faith with concern for her, maybe pushing the definition of an emergency if she wasn't in extremis, in which case there would have been no question of the legitimacy of doing it rather than letting her die unbaptized. But here's the thing. She can't now be baptized a second time because the church seriously opposes that as being sacrilegious. So you must tell somebody in authority. That would mean, I would think, if you know the pastor of the parish in which your your grandchild lives, you could speak to him and inform him if you don't feel like talking directly to the parents because of the difficulties that might entail. But the thing is, it should be on the record so that she is not baptized again. And if you were to ever, the parents would say, well, we're returning to the church, then obviously it would have to come out at that time. But I think you need to consult somebody who has the spiritual care of that family. I think that would be ideally if there's a parish that, your daughter and her husband go to even occasionally, or were married in, someone like that. And you can always certainly approach the Diocese of Spokane and ask it in that way. But it should be provided for on record, and you may be counseled to tell the parents immediately as well. Certainly if it should ever come up that they would intend to baptize her, or she becomes of age herself and wants to be baptized, she be informed. But a priest may have a different approach that is in common use and is encouraged, and that's why I think you need to talk to somebody who has some spiritual responsibility for the child, even if it's only at the diocese, but ideally, a priest close to the situation if there are any.
God bless you, Liz. Thanks so much for that very good question. 833-288-EWTN. Still a couple of open lines at 833-288-3986. Richard is in the great state of Florida watching us on YouTube today. Richard, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Praise be Jesus, everybody. I have a question, something that particularly bothers me. I had recently moved back down to Florida, and in a couple of parishes, I've noticed something, and I'm wondering, what is the licitness of allowing extraordinary ministers to open up the tabernacle, reach into it, pull out the consecrated host, and place it on the altar during the Eucharistic rite? I mean, the tabernacle is, I would say, only about 15 feet away from the altar. It is off to the side. And so I've just never seen that till I moved back here. Could you talk to us about that?
Well, sure. As the name Extraordinary Ministers of Holy Communion means, their proper name, a Eucharistic minister, is too broad. I know everybody understands that to mean those lay people who distribute Holy Communion. But they're really extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. The normal thing is, if there is a priest or deacon who would be present, then the ordinary minister would bring the host to the altar. But certainly, If the priest is infirm or if the priest simply needs that assistant and he were to ask that, then there's no prohibition per se against that. Because they're facultated to handle the Holy Eucharist. If they're facultated to handle the Holy Eucharist, they certainly can put a key in a lock and turn it and bring the ciborium to the altar. But typically, if there's an ordinary minister present, and you see that in most parishes that have deacons, the deacons will do that work. And that becomes properly their work if they're present, or the priest himself will do it. So I would say it's not an ideal following of the mind of the church, but sometimes necessity creates its own law, and it'll depend on the pastoral situation. So I don't know what the situation is in a particular parish that a priest would assign the laity to do that, but it wouldn't be. I've seen it many times, and I think you can't get worked up about it, and especially if it disturbs your peace in participating in the Holy Eucharist.
Next stop for us is the home state of Pope Leo XIV, the great state of Illinois. Kent is listening on Catholic Spirit Radio. Kent, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Good morning or afternoon, as the case may be. Yesterday, I came downstairs from my bedroom after the second ballot before there was an announced election, and I tuned in connected to the live stream from Vatican with a close-up of the chimney. Mm-hmm. And it was just a constant picture of the chimney, but then two pigeons showed up with their chick, about half grown, and they clustered around the chimney for a while, even feeding the chick, and then they flew away and the white smoke appeared. And I've never heard any mention of that. I just thought I would comment on that.
Well, I think it was our coverage, and somebody said, oh, look, it's the Holy Pigeon family or Seagull family or something like that, because he had the mother, the father, and the child. You know, we're human. We make significance sometimes where there isn't any intrinsic significance, and I think that's a case. You know, it was certainly an occasion for that commentator to mention the Holy Family. And as we're waiting, and it was quite comical. The seagulls came and they went away. Having lived in Rome, I know you know you're inland, but you're not so far from the sea. You see seagulls and you hear them a lot, and that was certainly going on yesterday as well. So intrinsically, I would not make anything of it, but sure, we find meaning sometimes where there isn't any intrinsic meaning, and some people did.
Would you change your tune if he had taken the name Jonathan?
I don't know. Would that have worked in any other language than English? I don't know how popular that was.
Probably not. God bless you. Thanks so much for that phone call. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. It is a free telephone call anywhere in North America. 833-288-3986. Deb is up next in upstate New York, listening on the EWTN app. Deb, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi, Dr. Donovan. I'm from upstate New York. Not that that matters, but I'm a new Catholic of 3 years after having lived a devout Protestant life, long life. I'm going to be 70. And I'm wondering if you could tell me if transubstantiation and the real presence in the Eucharist are the same thing or how they differ.
Okay. Yes and no. Yes or no, they're not the same thing, but yes, in a certain sense they are. It's sort of like ordination and priesthood. There is the act which makes a man a priest, and then there is the priestly things, the sanctifying things he does. Transubstantiation is a word that is applied to something that came up was an explanation devised in the 1200s to explain what takes place when a priest consecrates the bread and the wine. The substance is changed. That's the trans part. We use the word like transportation means a change from one place to another. Here are the changes of the substance. What is the substance in bread and wine? The common definition is, the nature of the thing. We know what bread does. We know what wine does. There's all kinds of, chemistry and other things you could say about that. But the principal thing is, what is the principal characteristic of this? It's food, solid food that strengthens us, or it's, liquid that strengthens us. So you have the bread and the wine, and the substance changes. And the explanation that Aquinas and others used were that the substance now becomes body and blood. So you have two things going on. The consecration transubstantiates the bread so that it's no longer bread, but it's the body of Christ. But what is called the accidents, the things maybe modern language would say the properties, the things that appeal to the senses. So the whiteness, the smell, the taste, the appearance, these are the properties. But in a way, that's an illusion, a miracle in and of itself, because what is underneath those properties, sustaining them, is not bread, but the body of Christ. And likewise with the wine. The substance is changed such that we still experience through the senses the properties, but it's the blood of Christ. And the Church goes farther by saying, once this sacramental change is taking place, while we see what gives the sign of bread or body and the sign of blood, because Christ cannot be, body can't be over here, blood over there. Wherever Christ is, it's the whole Christ. Body, blood, soul, and divinity. So we can receive under one species, and it's the entire Christ. So the body is what the sacramental sign is, and the blood is what the sacramental sign is. But then what comes along with that, concomitance it's called, what comes along with that is, where body is, there's blood, Christ's blood. And where Christ is, there's his human soul and his divinity. And so body, blood, soul, and divinity are all there, even though the sign is only of the body. And likewise, body, blood, soul, and divinity are there in the precious blood, even though the sign is only of the blood. So distinguishing between the reality and the sacramental sign that we see that tells us the reality is present. But what all of that's the real presence, Christ's own presence, body, blood, soul, and divinity. It's a substantial present, meaning that he is really there in his substance. Now, obviously, that's a miracle because he's in millions of places around the world at the same time by that same substance, but yet he is whole and entire at the side of the Father. This is something maybe we'll understand, but probably not when we get to heaven. So the transubstantiation is what brings that about. The change of bread into body and of wine into blood, and then the reality of the real presence, body, blood, soul, and divinity, immediately is there when that happens in either species. So that's the difference between the terms, although they're obviously related to the same reality, how Christ becomes present sacrificially on our altars, feeds us in Holy Communion, and then remains present in our tabernacles, all flowing from that transubstantiation of the species of bread and wine.
This Sunday is Mother's Day, and it wouldn't be Mother's Day without Mother Angelica, at least not here at EWTN. In honor of Mother, we're going to air her series on heaven, all 4 parts of it, beginning at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it'll be on EWTN television on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 11th. Be sure to check it out. We head now to St. Louis, Missouri. Julie is a first-time caller listening on Covenant Radio today. Julie, thanks so much for holding. Welcome to the program. You're on with Colin Donovan.
Hello. Thank you. Taking my call. I've never called. This is my first time.
Well, glad to have you call that first time. Now you'll be ready to do it again.
Yeah, of course. I love all the Catholic programs there. My question was, I left confession today, and I feel like I always confess the same things over and over again. And so I got to thinking, I was listening to Mother Angelica and various people about like repentance, and I'm like, well, if you're confessing the same stuff over and over again, how are you really repentant?
Well, you and about 1.5 billion other Catholics are probably asking them that same question at one time or another. You know, a lot of times we confess things that are our weaknesses, and we have a weakness to speak sharply with somebody or something like this, or some other thing. We have to lean into that, and we have to be proceeding against, working against it. But that can be a very long battle. And while it's a long battle, we're going to keep probably mentioning it in confession. So it doesn't mean that you weren't repentant because you didn't, stick with your resolve. The point would be, if you went into confession with no resolve to get better, then you might ask yourself, am I really repentant? If you go into confession with that resolve, that true sorrow, as you're expected to show in confession so the priest can absolve you, then assume that you're repentant, but you're still the weak person maybe who went in, and you've got to lean into that fault, and you've got to try to overcome it harder. You've got to pray about it and offer it to the Lord and do the kinds of things that's necessary to, keep on track. So, that's welcome to the human race and the Catholic family. This is what we all have to do to become, holy images of our Lord himself. And it'll be a struggle at times, and you are going to ask yourself that question. But I think the question to ask is, well, when I went into confession, did I really intend, or was I just, checking off a box? If you're checking off a box, then you're not all that repentant. But if you go in with this resolve, and the resolve breaks down pretty quickly because of your human weakness, God understands that, and so does the Church.
Next up is Marie, a first-time caller in Kansas City, Missouri, listening on the EWTN app today. Marie, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Marie. What's your question today?
My question is, yesterday when it was preparing for the new Pope to come out and give his blessing, one of the EWTN commentators mentioned something about religious articles. So my question is, did the Pope give a papal blessing, for the religious articles? And if so, did that extend to people who were watching it live?
I heard that comment, and I wondered about it as well, because very often I think if that's the intention, if that's the routine intention of the popes to bless, things that are present. I know at Fatima, I do the coverage every year, which is coming up next week, by the way, the Mass of the 13th in May. And there they usually will say that they will bless all religious articles. So it's a blessing of persons, which is part of the normal liturgical setting. If you go to Mass, you get a blessing. If you're, a walking, talking human being, or even one being carried who doesn't talk, you're going to get that blessing. But unless there's an intention to bless the articles, I would question whether articles were blessed in that situation. Now, the blessing by electronic means was explicitly mentioned, and that goes back to a decision in the 1920s when Marconi set up a microphone for the Pope of the day. I think it was Benedict the 15th, and he set it up, and it was decided that blessings given by electronic means would be equivalent to blessings given in person. So we know that the blessing is going out over the airwaves. It's intended to do that. I'm not so sure myself regarding articles unless that was explicitly mentioned. I believe it was only our commentator
Colin,
mentioned that.
I could be mistaken, but I think that is included and implicit in the Urbi et Orbi blessing.
That's basically the nub of the question, and I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, when we were there at Easter several years ago, I think that it was explained that is inclusive of the Urbi et Orbi blessing as any religious articles.
Oh, in the crowd, and so by TV. Well, if that was said, then that expresses the intention, and that's the point I'm trying to make. The intention must be expressed.
So that's a definite maybe, Marie.
That's a definite maybe, exactly.
John's up next. He's another first-time caller in Scranton, Pennsylvania, listening on our great affiliate there, JMJ Radio. John, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi, and thanks for taking my call. I wonder why the Pope Leo decided to, accept his or pronounce his popedom in Spanish, along with the Latin convention. And he was, obviously American, spoke English. It would have been a spectacular thing for him because it's never been done, to speak it in English from the, from the balcony. It would have been incredible. And the rationale has been because he wanted people to know that he was the Pope for everybody.
Yeah, I don't recall.
I don't get it.
I don't recall hearing Spanish. I heard Italian and Latin.
There was a little Spanish.
And remember, he was coming from Latin America to Rome when he became prefect of the dicastery. I can't speak for his motivation on that. We know he speaks English. He spoke a little bit at the homily that he gave to the cardinals this morning. It was in the wee hours carried on EWTN, but he spoke in English. In parts of that, as well as in Italian, which is the language, obviously, of the Curia and of the people of Rome, his diocese. So, I don't know. I would think
that's the biggest factor, is he's the Bishop of Rome.
I think so, but
and that's what every Holy Father that, in my lifetime at least, has delivered those remarks in Italian.
Right. Even Karol Wojtyła did that. I don't recall him speaking in any Polish when he came out on the balcony. Now, at many other times he did, because he was a polyglot. He often gave homilies in a variety of languages. And I expect we'll see that with Leo as well, because he is a polyglot and he will probably, depending on his audience, speak in those languages. But generally, they do it in Italian because that would be expected to be the largest body of people in the square at that moment, would be the people of Rome. We know there are a lot of tourists there, but I don't know that we could ever count the people from the neighborhoods and from all over Rome who came into the square when they heard about the white smoke. And there was also the members of the Curia and the staff of the government of the Vatican City State, as well as the staffs of the curial departments. All of those would have been primarily Italian speakers. So we're going to hear a lot of English from him, and the fact that he's an American speaks volumes in and of itself.
God bless you, John. We appreciate the phone call today. Colin, just as we wrap up here today on this Friday edition of EWTN's Open Line, just your final reflections and kind of putting a bow on our discussion of our new Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV.
Yeah, I think one of the most prescient expressions that I've seen in people discussing him is, perhaps, and this maybe explains why he was chosen, is he has the heart of Pope Francis in terms of mercy for the poor and marginalized and so on. But he also has the catechetical capabilities, probably, or of Benedict. So I think a lot of people were hoping for maybe somebody who would be a very good catechist, but also to be able to continue the great interest in the peripheries and those who are on the margins of society as well, which Pope Francis was especially noted for. And it looks like we may have gotten that, and we'll see further as time goes on.
On behalf of our host, Colin Donovan, our producer, Pedro Quiles, our call screener, Matt Gubensky, and our social media maven, Mr. Ace McKay, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks so much for tuning in to EWTN's Open Line Friday. We loved having you. Back at it again Monday with Father John Trigilio and EWTN's Open Line Monday. Until we get together then, pray for the Holy Father, go to Mass, and have a great weekend. God bless.
Greetings, I'm Father Cedric Pizzania. I have a saying that I absolutely love. Who you are is God's gift to you, but who you become is your gift to God. I'm going to help you to become your best, to be all that you can be. I hope that you will tune in each Sunday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time, right here on EWTN Radio.
Helping build strong Catholic families.
This is EWTN Radio.
On the next Speaking of Truth, we're talking with pilot Jessica Cox and Soulful Song.